Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to Bike Commuting 101. My name is Melina Lastly, and I'm a consultant to SANDAG Sustainable Transportation Services. If you're not familiar with our services, SANDAG offers free bike education classes, group bike rides, and bike rodeos for employers, the public, and schools. And if you want to have one of these classes offered at your place of employment or at a youth organization or school, you can sign up for one at sandag.org. I'll also drop that link in the chat in a minute. Many of your employers may already be part of our commuter program, but if not, I encourage you to reach out to us so you can take advantage of the other great free services that SANDAG offers to help support sustainable commuting by emailing us at sustainabletransportation@sandag.org. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our instructor for today's course, Kevin Barras from the San Diego County Bicycle Coalition. Take it away, Kevin.
Thank you, Melina, and thank you all for being here. I see some familiar names and some familiar faces, so thank you for that. This is Bike Commuting 101. As Melina mentioned, there are multiple classes that are available to you free through the SANDAG commuter program. This is one of them. This is the first one. This is the oldest one. This is the one that sort of started things off. And as we got information from people about more specific details they'd like us to go in, we felt the need to even expand the offerings further than we had before. So at the end of the presentation, I imagine you're going to have some questions about how come you didn't talk about this, or can you spend more time talking about that? And I'm happy to do it. Also, we'll have a list of all the other class types that exist, including classes specific to e-bikes, classes specific to route planning and maintenance, and all kinds of other things. But for now, we're starting at the beginning. That's why we call it the 101 class. I've got about 45, well, let's see. I've got about 3 hours worth of information I'm going to give in 45 minutes. So bear with me. That said, you are encouraged to communicate with me through the chat window. There are going to be opportunities and places where you're encouraged and dare I say required to give me a little bit of feedback. I'll ask questions and you can answer them in that chat window. So if you don't know where that is yet, now's the time to find it and be like Delaney and say hi if you don't mind. Okay, so let's jump right in. These are the things that I get questions about the most. And so for that reason, these are the things I focus on the most. Things like, why would I want to ride a bike in the first place? You're already here, so I assume you've got some answers for that one already, but I'll go over a couple of them. It would be silly of me not to address the fact that bike crashes occur, and so we'll talk about what the causes of those are and how the reality of the situation can differ from how it feels sometimes. We'll talk about specifically the different types of infrastructure that exist, how to use those different types of infrastructure, the laws relating to where you should ride, not only the specific types of bike lanes and bike routes, but also as a bicyclist, your position within that lane. Are you in the middle? Are you on the right? Are you on the left? Why would there be reasons for any of those things? It's a pretty specific topic to bicycles, not something that you're thinking about when you're driving a car. And so I like to spend a little bit of time on it. We will also make sure and leave time for questions at the end. So Q&A. If you had a funny story, if you had a fun fact, if you just wanted to contribute anything at all, feel free to put it in that chat window and I'll keep an eye on it, as well as Melina and my friend Ian as well. So with that, the couple slides I'm going to try and spend the least amount of time on, because I think you already know the answers to these, are reasons why I would even want to use a bike in the first place. Health and fitness is a pretty obvious one. Money is a pretty good motivator for people. AAA puts out a study every year letting people know the average cost of owning a car. Now, this is a car you've already paid for. It's your car. You own it outright. In order to continue owning that car, it costs on average $12,182 per year. That's 2024 figures. So that's gas, that's maintenance, that's insurance, depreciation is part of that, wear and tear. It all goes into that. So the fewer miles you put on that car, in theory, you can make that number go down, and it's kind of like you're paying yourself money to ride a bike. It requires some mental gymnastics, but that's kind of what's going on. I'd argue it's more fun to ride a bike than to drive a car. It depends on where you're riding and how you're riding, but generally speaking, driving is pretty boring. It can be faster. Our offices are in downtown San Diego, and I live closer to Normal Heights in central San Diego. If I drive to work, I have to factor in the amount of time it takes me to find parking. If I drive my bike to work, then I drive right to the front door and I go right in. So it can literally be faster for me to get from point A to point B by bicycle than by car, depending on the trip. And then finally, pride and accomplishment. No one cares that you drove to work today, but we encourage bragging about biking to work. So those are internal reasons. External reasons, again, these are all pretty obvious. The one that has some cool studies to back it up is this for business section. The idea being multiple studies across multiple periods of time have shown that if an individual visits a business for the first time by bicycle, on average, their individual purchase is smaller than that of someone who visits that business for the first time in a car. However, the frequency with which they return to that business afterwards is much, much higher. You're more likely to go back to a place if you visit it by bike for the first time. You're a little more connected to the community that you're in. You are not in a box separated from the community. You're not on a freeway separated from the community. You're right there in the neighborhood. So that sense of connection can increase well-being and happiness, but literally the amount of money that you spend at a place over time. So bikes are good for business. That said, let's jump into the nitty-gritty. So you have concerns when it comes to using a bike on the road. Those concerns when it comes to using the bike on the road include things like other people who don't know what they're doing, other people who do know what they're doing but don't care. And those can be people on bikes or people in cars. The bike itself, is it going to fall apart when I'm halfway there? How do I know ahead of time? How can I carry things? I don't recommend hanging gallon jugs of milk from the handlebars. It's not a good look. So we'll talk about some of that, better ways to do that. The road itself. So not only potholes, but also hills. I've talked to people who've lived in San Diego for a long time and didn't realize that there were any hills in San Diego until they started riding a bike. And then they figured out there are hills all over the place. It's not as flat as you thought, which isn't something you experience if you're just driving everywhere. But in addition to hills and potholes and road conditions, the specific type of street you're riding on. So like, let's say it's really, narrow and really fast, or it's a whole bunch of lanes, multiple lanes across, or there's freeway on-ramps coming up ahead. How do we anticipate these things? How do we put ourselves in situations where we feel the most comfortable? We'll cover that. And then finally, what happens in an emergency? What's my plan ahead for what to do if something goes wrong? What are my backup plans? When I drive a car, I know what to do if something goes wrong, generally speaking. The vast majority of the time that you're driving, you don't have to utilize that. The vast majority of the time you're driving a bicycle, you don't have to utilize that. But it's nice to know what the plan is before you get there. Those emergencies, when they do happen, can involve crashing. So let's talk about it. This is a pie chart which breaks down all of the causes of a bicycle crash that occurred over a period of time. The data from this is pulled from Oceanside specifically, but we've found that it's pretty representative of the communities around San Diego County as a whole. So anytime a bike crashed and it was recorded that that bike crashed, there was a cause associated with it, and this is the breakdown of those causes. The first thing to notice, far and away, the most, maybe it's not obvious, but the most common type of bike crash is the solo fall. It's also the most embarrassing type of bike crash. So that's just you on your own, nobody else around, you fall down for some reason. You could have stopped short and hit the brakes too hard. You could have taken a turn too sharp. Train tracks are a big one, especially downtown. Trolley tracks. If you're riding parallel to a trolley track, it's easy for it to grab your wheel and take you down. Sand, loose gravel, there's all kinds of things. So when a bike crash happens, if you were asked to guess what the cause of that crash was without any information, if you guessed solo fall, you'd probably be in the right. Half of all crashes, almost half of all crashes that occurred were completely solo. There are other sections of the pie chart represented here, including parked car, animal, another bicycle, and vehicle. There's a little tiny sliver of the pie chart at the top, which is not labeled. In the chat, if you wouldn't mind, put your guess for what you think that little tiny sliver of the pie chart is. So it's something that's not represented here, but it is a large enough cause of a bike crash to be represented on this chart. It's not the solo fall, it's not the vehicle, not another bicycle, not animal, not parked car. Any guesses at all? Pete knows this one already, and he's jumped in with that, so thank you, Pete. Daphne also guessed the same thing, which is pedestrian, and that answer is 100% correct. Bike versus pedestrian is absolutely a cause of collisions. This can be caused in a lot of different places. Intersections, going across crosswalks, riding behind someone who's walking in a bike path type situation. Riding bikes on sidewalks is something that does happen, and we'll talk about those in a second. But yeah, bike versus pedestrian is a thing that happens. Virtual high five to Pete and to Daphne. Nice job. Bike versus parked car. Oops. Bike versus parked car is absolutely a thing that happens. Not only the open door of the parked car that opens unexpectedly in front of you, but also literally just riding into the back of a parked car. I know people that it's happened to. It's a real thing. Bike versus animal, more common in rural areas, I think, than it is in residential spaces, but I've been chased by a dog before. It does happen. And then finally, let's call your attention to the two largest sections of this pie chart other than solo, and those are bike versus bike and bike versus vehicle. The first thing that I'd call your attention to is the odds that you get into a collision of some kind with a vehicle are almost equal to the odds that you get into a collision of some kind with a bicycle. So bike versus bike collisions could be riding next to each other and getting tangled up. Your front wheel goes into the back of their back wheel and you fall down. Someone stops short in front of you and you didn't realize it. Coming around a corner, someone's on the wrong side of the street coming towards you. These are all things that happen in real life. So 18.3, almost 20% of all bike crashes are bike versus bike crashes, which is almost equal to the odds, a little bit higher, that you are in a car versus bike collision. Now, this is obviously the scariest section of that pie chart. This is the one that is going to result in the most major injuries. So for that reason, we'll take this 19.4%, this section of the pie chart, and blow it up into its specific causes. So bike versus car collisions happened. Why did those collisions happen? That is what this pie chart seeks to break down. Take it in for a second. I'll call your attention to the fact that this pie chart is split up into two sections, blue and red. Blue is car versus bike collisions that were the fault of the bicyclist. Red is car versus bike collisions that were the fault of the motorist. In this situation specifically, in this study specifically, more car versus bike collisions were found to be the fault of the cyclist than the fault of the car driver. When we zoom out to a more national level, this gets closer to 50-50. But for this study specifically in Oceanside, it was found that 61% of the time, the cyclist was blamed for the collision. Now, as a cyclist, this isn't necessarily the end of the world for me. As a cyclist, what this means is I'm the one on the bike. I'm the one that can control for these things. So if I don't ride on the wrong side of the street and I don't ride on the sidewalk, I no longer have to worry about that as a cause of car versus bike collisions. That whole section of the pie chart doesn't exist anymore. It goes away. Second biggest section, running stop signs or running red lights. If I, as a person on a bicycle, don't run stop signs and don't run red lights, I no longer have to worry about that as a cause of car versus bike collisions. And the things in red, the things that are found to be the fault of the motorist, the vast majority of those I can anticipate or avoid in some way. Let's take on the car door section, which is only 4%, but is absolutely a scary thing that does happen. It's there's a law that says it's illegal to open your car door when it's unsafe to do so. And if you open your car door when it's unsafe and someone hits the car door, it's your fault for opening the car door when it's unsafe. That said, I, as a cyclist, can avoid that situation from happening in the first place if I'm giving myself enough space away from those parked cars so that even if the door did open, I wouldn't it becomes a non-issue because I'm far enough away from that opening car door that I don't have to worry about it opening unexpectedly. Hitting the car door is definitely part of the cause of this. The other big mode of injury when it comes to car doors and bicycle drivers is swerving to avoid the open car door and swerving into the path of the car behind you unexpectedly. That doesn't work for anybody either. So as a cyclist, yes, it's the fault of the car driver, but I can anticipate or avoid that by riding far enough away from that parked car that it wasn't an issue anymore. Right hook and left cross are two of the larger sections of the car versus bike collisions that were found to be the fault of the car driver. And so for that reason, we'll go into a little more detail on those in a second. Before I move on from this pie chart, I do want to call your attention to a bit of vocabulary. For this entire presentation to date and going forward for the rest of the hour, you won't hear me use the word car accident, traffic accident, and that's because the vast majority, I would argue maybe even 100% of the time, these aren't necessarily accidents. Accidents implies that nothing else could have been done, that this was an act of God and no matter what, it was going to happen. The vast majority of the time, that's not true. It's somebody's fault, and somebody, if they had done something different, would have made it so that that crash did not occur. Maybe it's the cyclist, maybe it's the car driver, maybe the road was designed in such a way that it made it more likely for that collision to happen. So it's the fault of the engineers who designed the road unsafely. So I encourage all of us to, if not eliminate the word car accident or traffic accident from our vocabulary, at least be aware of what you're saying when you say it. And to imply that this is just a thing that happens and it's just the way of the world isn't true. There's a way to make it so that fewer of these crashes happen, fewer of these collisions happen. And part of the thing that can help do that is paying attention to these specific rules of the road. How's that for a transition, huh? I'm good at my job. Woo! Okay, so the other vocabulary word I've used throughout this is oftentimes instead of saying riding a bike, I'll say driving a bike. And sometimes this gets the kids at the elementary school presentations to go, that doesn't make sense. And I go, it does. You drive, you're choosing where it goes. You're not just sitting on it and it's doing its own thing. You're actively involved in where this thing goes. So it is driving a bicycle. For that reason, when you're driving a bicycle, specifically on a roadway in a public space, then the rules of that roadway apply to you. Rules of the road apply to users of the road. And if you're in the road and you're on a skateboard, roller skate, rollerblade, bicycle, e-bike, motorcycle, truck, Lyft, Uber, taxi, 18-wheeler, whatever. If you're using the road, the rules of the road apply to you. Concepts that are pretty well known, I think, are stop signs. However, what we're going to be talking about today is, yes, there are specific vehicle codes that you're supposed to follow, 21-2, whatever. But keep in mind that there's a difference between what the law says and what reality is in real life. Like there's a difference between what people are supposed to do and what they do. Do bicycle drivers come to full and complete stops at every single stop sign they approach? Probably not. Do car drivers come to full and complete stop signs at every single stop sign they approach? Probably not. So what I need us all to remember when we get to the end of this presentation is, yes, there are specific laws. There are also, let's see, It's what the law says, it's what keeps you safe, and it's what people expect you to do. Those can be three different things. So this is where communication becomes very important. This concept of first come, first served at an intersection. There's no different rule for bicycles where if the bicycle gets there second and the car driver gives them a little wave, then it's okay that they go in front. No, the part of the reason we have these rules is to make it so that there's consistent behavior. I can generally expect what's going to happen before it happens. So if two people approach an intersection and whoever gets there first goes first, whether they're in a car, on a bike, or otherwise. Even if you didn't know any laws at all, any traffic laws whatsoever, as long as you were acting in a way that was predictable, as long as you were acting in a way that made it easier for other people to understand what you're going to do before you did it, that's absolutely something that would keep you safe. Obeying traffic control devices. Stop signs and stoplights are for all road users. And slower traffic on the right and passing on the left. This is true on freeways. If you're passing someone on the freeway, you're supposed to do it on the left. Slower traffic's supposed to be over to the right. If you're on a street with multiple lanes, slower traffic on the right, passing on the left. As a bicyclist, oftentimes, not 100% of the time, but oftentimes people using bicycles are slower on the street than people that are using cars. Again, not 100% of the time, but oftentimes. So for that reason, I've sometimes heard yelled at me, bicycles need to be as far to the right as possible. However, the specific vehicle code regarding this law, vehicle code 21202, states that you need to ride as far to the right as practicable. Practicable is a different word than possible. So, as an example, this is a fairly low-res image. While I take a quick sip of water, I'd like to see one or two people, or 3, or 4, or 19, in the chat answering this question. Imagine this is the view you have in front of you. Maybe you don't have your glasses on, and that's why it's low res. If this is the street that you find yourself approaching, you're on a bicycle, this is the view you have in front of you. There are some obvious things. There are some less obvious things. What are you noticing? What is your attention being called to? What do you want to pay attention to? What do you see that's worth mentioning? What are some things that would cause you to alter your behavior in some way? What do you see in this picture? What stands out to you? Give me a couple answers to that question. Okay, Edward says, let me scroll up, no bike lane and marked vehicle parking. So in terms of paint on the ground, we've got these little T things, which basically say generally we'd prefer you to put your car in between these spaces. But beyond that, yeah, I'm not seeing any markings on the road which indicate where cars are supposed to be, where bikes are supposed to be. Is this a bike facility of some kind? There's really nothing on the road. So you're right. One thing that I'm noticing is the lack of information about no bike lane and marked vehicle parking. Moises says, yes, open car door. That's sort of the number one thing that people notice. This car door is open. This car door is not open. Will it open soon? I don't know. I know some people that'll say, oh, I'll look in the back of the car and see if I can see someone's head. That doesn't work all the time. So we are aware of the fact that this car's width is going to increase at any moment. And this width of this car has increased because they've opened the car door. So I want to see that ahead of me and make sure I'm aware of it before I get there. Mark says, first thing I notice is open car door. Hansel says, guy getting out of car. Josh says, I wouldn't want to weave in and out of the parked cars, even though car drivers have yelled at me for not doing this. Interesting. So you know what? Yes, Josh, we're going to get down into that one. Before I get to the weave, so let's say, if this is the road you're approaching, you're on a bicycle, you are choosing your position, you're choosing where you want to be, you're choosing how you want to interact with these things that are in front of you. There's a couple things that weren't mentioned yet. One of the things is that there's a stop sign. Again, low resolution, hard to see, but there's a stop sign. So we've got an intersection in front of us. We've got a stop sign at that intersection. The other thing I see is a hill that goes up, Even on an e-bike, that may slow my progress a little bit, and I want to be aware of the fact that I'm going to start to move slower when I'm in this road. It's a fairly wide intersection. We've got this big median in between. It's going to take a long time, or longer than expected maybe, for other users of the road to get across the intersection. So I want to be aware of that as well. I also see a sidewalk. One option that's available to you as a user of a bicycle is you can stop being the user of a bicycle and start being a pedestrian. Pedestrians have different rules associated with them when, being a pedestrian is different than using a bike, is different than driving a car. Car drivers are required to yield to pedestrians at intersections. So if you're a pedestrian, you're at the corner, you're waiting to cross, and there's a car approaching, whether there's a stop sign or not, they're required to yield to pedestrians at intersections. That's what the law says. Do they do that every time? Absolutely not. But let's say up ahead, I've got a bunch of construction. Let's say up ahead, I've got a freeway on-ramp. Let's say up ahead, whatever it is. I think it's important to have as a tool in your toolbox this option to get off of the bike and become a pedestrian. Now you're walking with the bike. You're on the sidewalk. You're walking on the sidewalk. And then when you feel comfortable enough again, you're back on that bike and continuing on your way into the roadway. This has some obvious downsides. It's much slower. When you do enter the roadway again, you're going to have to find a place to do that where people can see you and expect you. But again, it's a tool to have in your toolbox, not one that I find myself using very often, but it's one that's important to remember that you have. Next level up from, okay, we're not going to be on the sidewalk, we're going to be in the street, but we're going to ride as far to the right as possible. And this is what Josh was talking about. Riding as far to the right as possible, which would mean weaving in between parked cars on the road. So I'm next to the curb, I'm around the car, I'm back to the curb, I'm around the car, I'm around the door, I'm back to the curb, around the car, back to the curb, around the car. I think the best word to describe that movement would be unpredictable. You're frankly invisible when you're in between the parked cars next to the curb, and then all of a sudden in the travel lane again, where someone wasn't expecting you to be. The idea is, I think, well, I guess I've heard, although not recently, you used to hear more often people say, oh, you should ride your bike as though you're invisible. And the issue with riding your bike as though you're invisible is then you get treated as though you're invisible. If you act like no one can see you, then it's more likely that no one can see you. And so riding as far to the right as possible makes you unpredictable. It makes you hard to see. It makes it harder for people to interact with you. You're gonna have to get closer to the middle of the road at some point when that door opens, when it's a wide car, whatever else. And for that reason, once you do that in a way that's unpredictable, that puts everybody else in danger and yourself in danger as well. So I don't like this movement. I don't like this unpredictable movement. So let's say, okay, great. We're going to ride in a straight line as far to the right as possible. The obvious danger here, I think you can see, is the opening of that car door. And again, hitting the car door is part of it, but swerving into traffic to avoid the opening of the park door is an issue as well. So let's say, okay, great. Now I'm going to ride in a straight line. I'm going to do it just outside the edge of where the open car door is. So I don't have to worry about the car door. I'm riding in a straight line. I'm predictable. This is incorrect. This is wrong. This is not a good position for this specific roadway. Who can tell me how? And Pete, give me 20 seconds for someone else to answer before you jump in. This is the line that we've drawn. This is a straight line, thereby making you predictable. It is outside the door zone. It is still incorrect. Can anybody give me an answer for why this might be incorrect? And if you don't know, type, I don't know. Or not. I'm not going to make you type, I don't know. That'd be rude. Okay, Cassidy, yes, hi, good to see you. Cars have no room to pass, but might try. Hansel, car might try to pass. Both of these are absolutely the answers I was looking for. Should we do virtual high fives again? Virtual high five for Cassidy. Virtual high five for Hansel. Nice job. So we're right in the middle so they can't make poor decisions, LOL. Great, I love it. One of the things that wasn't mentioned when I asked for descriptions of what we're seeing here is that this is a fairly narrow lane. Ideally, we would have enough room for the parked car, the open door of that parked car, another maybe, I don't know, foot of startle room, let's call it. Then space for the bicyclist, maybe, what are we, 3 feet wide, give or take? Then cars are required to give 3 feet of space when passing. And then we've got another 10 feet wide car. That's a whole bunch of feet altogether. And I don't see enough room for all of those things to happen simultaneously here. I don't see enough room for a parked car, open car door, bicycle, passing space, and space for a car. So for that reason, putting yourself in a position where people feel like they can barely kind of sort of squeeze by you means that they will barely kind of sort of squeeze by you. And when they do that, you're left with 3 inches between the back of your head and the side of their side view mirror. That's not good for anybody. So for that reason, in this specific situation, which is the first thing mentioned about it was right. There is no bike lane. There is no bike specific infrastructure. There is no paint on the ground. There is no separated facility. This is a situation where you are going to be forced to make the determination for yourself that this lane is too narrow to share side by side with a car. And because this lane is too narrow to share side by side with a car, you as a bicyclist probably should put yourself closer to the middle of that lane, discouraging that unsafe passing. And you as a car driver may see bicyclists closer to the middle of that lane. And it's not just because they're mean and they don't like cars. It's because this is as far right as practicable. Any further, and there would be enough room for you to feel like you can barely kind of sort of squeeze by, even though you can't. Discouraging unsafe passing by putting yourself closer to the middle of that lane is what is recommended by law in this specific situation. That said, it is uncomfortable. It is confusing. It is scary. It is not something that comes second nature. The more you do it, the better you get at it. Absolutely. But one of the other options you have to avoid this situation entirely is to avoid this situation entirely. We'll talk a little bit about route planning in another few minutes, but knowing ahead of time, if I knew I had this in front of me, I had a narrow road with an uphill that's going to make me go slow, and I know I'm going to have to be in the middle of the road to discourage that unsafe passing. If that made me feel uncomfortable, if that isn't something I wanted to participate in, okay. Plan ahead. What are the alternative routes? Maybe I go 1 or 2 blocks over and the volume of traffic is lower. Maybe I go 1 or 2 blocks over and there is some sort of bike lane or other facility over there. Planning your route isn't just avoiding hills. There are other things, there are types of infrastructure, there are types of streets that you'd want to know about. And so planning can help you avoid having to be in these situations in the first place. Not every road has a bike lane on it. Not every road has something separated. So it's important to know what to do when you find yourself in these situations and what keeps you the safest. And in a narrow lane situation where there isn't enough room for a car and a bike to be side by side, bikes, you may find yourself as a bike driver closer to the middle of the road, and you as a car driver may find bicyclists closer to the middle of the road as well. Oh, how am I doing? Everybody still awake? This is good. We're all on board. All right. Speaking of lane positioning, in that pie chart, we mentioned the right hook and the left cross. This is an example of the right hook situation. So in this example, we don't have any car parking on the side, and so it feels like there's enough room for the car and the bicycle to be side by side. At the intersection, let's say this is a signalized intersection. It says stop there, but let's just imagine this is a traffic light. The light is red. The bicyclist plans on going straight through the intersection after the light changes. However, with the red light, they don't want to feel like they're in anybody's way, so they'll stop themselves way on the right-hand edge of that intersection, maybe even putting their foot up on the curb. The issue with this is, well, there's a few. One being, cars are allowed to turn right on red. You are allowed to turn right on red, and if you're not turning right, putting yourself as far to the right as you can be may even prevent people behind you from being able to turn right. So you're blocking the cars even though you didn't plan on blocking the cars. More importantly, I would argue, is when that light changes and you plan on going straight, the car that plans on turning right either doesn't see you because you're all the way over there or assumes that you're also turning right. This is important whether the light has just changed or whether it's green and been green for a while. A car passes the bicyclist and then turns right, either because they don't see them, because they do a poor job of estimating their speed, whatever else. And this is called a right hook, and it's a fairly common type of car versus bike collision. The car driver can prevent this type of collision by merging before they turn. Car drivers are required to merge to as far right of the road as practicable before making the right turn. You've seen it and I've seen it. People that make right turns from the middle of the road, very frustrating, not fun for anybody. You're merging first and then you're turning. And when you're merging, it's just like merging into any other lane. You're looking behind you, you're making sure it's safe, you're putting on your turn signal, and after you're on the right side of the road, then you're making your turn. This is why bike lanes become dashed before intersections, to allow space for the cars to merge into that bike lane before they make their turn, as opposed to turning across it at the last second. It also becomes dashed to allow this bicyclist to leave the bike lane. Going straight through an intersection on the right-hand edge of the road in this situation, without any sort of dedicated cycling facility, is not recommended. Putting yourself in a position which communicates your intention, which lets people know where you're going to go, is encouraged. So I'm in the middle of that lane, people know I'm going to go straight. If I'm on the left side of the lane, I'm probably communicating that I'm turning left. If I'm on the right side of the road, I'm communicating that I'm turning right. Most every intersection that I come to as a bicyclist, I'm going to put myself closer to the middle of that lane. If there are a whole bunch of cars all backed up and the light is red and I'm approaching that line of cars, am I saying that it's possible that it's good for you to get in line behind all those cars and wait? Yes. Am I saying it's possible for you to go to the front of all those cars and then you're first in line? Maybe, if the lane is wide enough after the intersection to continue to share side by side with a car and a bike, then potentially that's possible. But if it's a situation where it's so narrow that you're not going to be able to share and you're going to be holding that lane, cutting to the front and then making everybody go slow behind you doesn't feel super nice to me. So communicate your position, put yourself in a position within the lane that communicates your destination. And doing so at intersections is a good way to prevent those right hooks. Your lane choice is important, as is your position within the lane. So this is a option lane, right? We can go straight or we can turn right. And this is a dedicated left-hand turn lane. So if I was planning on turning left, I wouldn't do it from the straight through lane. And I definitely wouldn't do it from the right side of the road. I'd put myself in a position which communicated my destination based on my lane choice. That said, there's a bunch of different ways to turn left, frankly. One of them is to turn right and then make a U-turn when it's safe. And now you're facing in the correct direction and you're across the intersection, you've just turned left. One would be to get off the bike, hit the crosswalk button, walk across the crosswalk, hit the button again, walk across the crosswalk, get back on the bike and continue on your way. Now you've turned left. Another would be to go straight across the intersection and then make a right turn and then make another right turn and then make another right turn. Now you've gone all the way around the block using only right turns and you're facing to the left from where you started. That's another option. The recommended option is using the road in the way it was designed. So sometimes that does mean merging across a travel lane, putting yourself in that left-hand turn lane, in the middle of that left-hand turn lane, probably. And after you've made that turn, if it's wide enough, you're on the right side of the road. But there's no ambiguity. If I'm in this lane, I'm turning left and everybody knows it. Now I have to get myself over there somehow. So in a situation where it's the differentiation between speed is high. So if everybody around me is going 45 and I'm going 15, it's going to be pretty hard for me to get into that lane. And I'm aware of that. I may even wait until the very, very end until the cars are already stopped and then move over there. Or if it's a situation where I'm going just as fast as the traffic around me or there's no traffic, then I may merge over early and put myself into that left-hand lane as soon as I can. And then I'm just holding that space and people are able to understand what I'm going to do next because of my position within the lane and because of my lane choice. There's a bunch of different ways to do movements on the road. There's the way that's recommended by law. There's the way that keeps you the safest. There's the way that people expect you to do. And those can be three different things. I can't go over every single option right now. I can't talk through every single one of these in as much detail as I want to. There are other classes that we teach, including city cycling, which is a 3-hour class, smart cycling, which is an 8-hour plus class. And you can actually get certified as an instructor if you want. There's more to learn. This is the introduction to the topic. And if you have more questions about this, feel free to put it in the chat. One of the things I get questions about a lot are specific laws, though, when it comes to road usage. And so for that reason, I'll go back just a couple years. We'll do new laws for 2023, new laws for 2024, and new laws for 2025. And I'm keeping an eye on what my new slide for 2026 will be. For this one, I'll just call your attention to this section in the middle here. Safe passing is sort of the colloquial term for it. The idea being, well, let's see. I'll call your attention first to the most important part, which is when safe. So you, as a car driver, plan on passing a bicyclist. You already know that there's a law that says you're required to give 3 feet of space when passing. And so for some people, what that means is just given a halfway lane change. I'm going to give just enough 3 feet of space so that I get maybe 2 wheels on one side of the line and 2 on the other. I'm not fully committed to changing lanes. I'm just kind of getting around the bicyclist and then continuing on my way. The issue with that is it makes you unpredictable. The cars behind you don't know, car drivers behind you don't know what you're going to be doing. Unpredictable. That's the big part of it. So this rule, which is as enforced as you assume it is, states that if you are planning on passing a bicyclist, you should go ahead and fully change lanes in order to pass that bicyclist. Be they on the right side, middle side, left side, whatever. It just seeks to remove the ambiguity of the halfway lane change. You're already going to be moving over a little bit. You might as well commit to that full lane change. After you've passed the bicyclist, then you're back over into the right lane that you want to be in, and you continue on your way. When safe. This is a multi-lane road situation, more than one lane moving in the same direction. When safe moving over. Are you required to do something dangerous? No. When you have the ability to, when it's safe to, fully change lanes in order to pass the bicyclist. It's a law. It's a real thing. For 2024, they've been talking about it for a while. They began implementing this daylighting situation. And in 2025, they've really begun enforcing it. Daylighting refers to the red zone next to crosswalks and intersections. You, as the user of feet and of crosswalks, know that when you're using a crosswalk and someone is parked right up next to the edge of that crosswalk, it makes it hard for you to see into the travel lane. It makes it hard for car drivers to see into the crosswalk. So they've increased the red zone next to crosswalks to make it easier for visual things to happen. Easier for you to see, easier for you to be seen. This applies to intersections as well. You shouldn't be parking your car right next to the corner because, again, it makes it harder for pedestrians to see things, and it makes it hard for other people to see those pedestrians as well. So even if it's not painted red, if you're parked right next to a crosswalk, you're absolutely in a situation where you can receive a ticket for that. And they've started enforcing that more in 2025. The fun one that started in 2024, and again is being rolled out to more places as well, is this. They've updated the way that these pedestrian signals work. I've been to other cities, and this is at every single intersection across the city. In San Diego, they're limiting it to, at least now, only at the busier intersections. The way things used to work was the light was red and the hand was red, and simultaneously the light would turn green and beep, boop, beep, boop. We'd have the little walking person. And those two things would happen simultaneously. Cars would start driving and pedestrians would step off the corner into the crosswalk. This opens up the right hook and the left cross situation. When I'm at schools, I oftentimes will say to the kids, hey, are cars allowed, if the crosswalk sign is on and it's the person, are cars allowed to drive across that crosswalk? And they go, no. And I go, yeah, unfortunately they are. They're supposed to look out for kids, but cars turning right are going to turn across that crosswalk. Cars turning left are going to turn across that crosswalk. So the new thing that started happening is the light is red, the hand is red, the light stays red, and first the pedestrian sign comes on. Beep, boop, beep, boop. You're halfway across the intersection before the light changes to green. and then the cars get to start moving. This means when they do make that left turn, when they do make that right turn, you're already in the intersection. It's easier for them to see you. And so visibility is increased. It takes some getting used to. It's not at every single intersection in San Diego. I was in Washington, D.C., and in every single intersection in Washington, D.C., they have this set up. The other thing they have set up there, which is set up here as well, is bikes go on the walk signal. I'm on my bike. I'm in traffic with everybody else. The cars are with me. I'm next to the cars. The light is red. Beep, boop, beep, boop. Pedestrian sign starts. People start walking, and I start riding. I get halfway across that intersection before the light changes. And then it reduces the likelihood of those left crosses and those right hooks. It takes some getting used to. The more you see it, the more you'll understand it. But it's a good idea. It's being rolled out in cities all across the country. So pay attention next time you're at an intersection with a pedestrian sign. And then finally for 2025, I have a whole class about e-bikes that's an hour plus long. But to touch on it briefly here, one of the new rules for 2025 is they've made it so that it's harder to switch between classifications, if not impossible, to switch between classifications of e-bikes. Class 3 e-bikes have a top assisted speed of 28 miles per hour, whereas a Class 1 and Class 2 has that top speed of 20 miles per hour. There used to be devices that could switch between Class 2 and Class 3 even while you were riding them. That sort of defeated the purpose of the differentiation between those classes. So for that reason, that's no longer a thing. If it's a Class 2, it's a Class 2. If it has a throttle, it's a Class 2. If it's a Class 2, it can't go 20 miles. The motor won't push beyond 20. If the motor does push beyond 20 all the way up to 28, then it's a Class 3. And if it's a Class 3, it has no throttle. There are walking modes on some of these that the throttle will get you up to 2.5 miles an hour or something. But if you want more information about that, you got to take the e-bike class. Okay, we're down to our last few slides here. Multimodal commuting is highly encouraged. I am not telling you all to sell your cars and only use your bikes to get around forever. If you want to, go for it. But working this into your routine is a good way to go about it. It doesn't necessarily mean riding your bike to work every single day. Pick one day a week, pick one day a month, one day a year, bike to work day, and that's your start, right? And from there, you can build up. You can put your bike on the bus. Every bus in San Diego now has space for 3 bikes. There's space for bikes on the coaster. There's space for bikes on the trolley. There's space for bikes on Amtrak. And even without a bike rack, depending on your car, put the seats down. Now there's space for the bike in the back of your car. Get a bike rack. Now there's space for the bike in your back of your car. Drive halfway and then bike the rest of the way. And just tell people you rode the whole way. No one's ever going to know. It's fine. So multimodal commuting means picking more than one type of transportation and using that in a single trip. It's a fun way to go about it. If I'm going downtown, if I'm going to a place where I know there is no parking, maybe I'll drive most of the way and then park a couple miles away and then use the bike to get the last few, miles or whatever. So I don't have to worry about parking anymore. So it's an option and a good one to keep in mind. If you were here in person, I would now hand you a bike map. Because you are not here in person, we'll put a link to the SANDAG bike map in the chat, and you can also glance at it here. So this is all the way up in Oceanside, Vista, San Marcos, Escondido, down to Encinitas. In the middle of the county, we've got Solana Beach. We've got this section here can be zoomed into, and it's UC San Diego. There's a lot of specific bike facilities there. And then Central and South San Diego is represented here. The map is unique because it differentiates between the different types of bike infrastructure that exist. Google Maps and Apple Maps do an okay job of saying, if you're going to use a bike, use this road. They don't always do a good job of telling you why. So taking the information you get from Google Maps and Apple Maps and cross-referencing it and comparing it to the SANDAG bike map will let you know, hey, there's these specific types of infrastructure that I want to try and use. There are these separated cycling facilities that, even though it's a few miles away, maybe I do want to add on the distance to get myself to a place where I feel more comfortable. So knowing what these are is nice. The SANDAG bike map exists as a paper bike map, but exists online as well. And Melina's been nice enough to put a link to the chat, a link in the chat to the bike map. The bike map differentiates between the different types of bike infrastructure, and I'll finish off just by saying what those are. This is a bike path. Bike paths are essentially defined by their lack of car traffic. You may see people walking, maybe dog leashes that are way too long. These are most popular. Let's see, like there's the San Diego River Trail that goes from essentially SDSU all the way down to the beach. There's a bunch of them. Unless you live at one end and work at the other end, you're probably not using them all the time. But again, if you know where they are and you can work it into your commute, it's a nice thing to know about. Bike lanes are just paint. Sometimes they'll have a little bit of a buffer that's painted in between the travel lane and the bike lane. Sometimes that buffer will be in between the car parking and the bike lane. Sometimes it'll be on both sides. The important thing to remember is it's just paint. There's nothing to physically prevent you from driving over the paint. There's nothing to physically prevent a bicyclist from biking over the paint. And at intersections, that paint does become dashed, which means, as previously discussed, cars should merge into that bike lane before turning right, and bicyclists should merge out of that bike lane before continuing straight. So they're nice. It's good to know that this is where you're supposed to be. If you see a bike lane and you're riding on a street that has a bike lane, you're required by law to use that bike lane, except for, as previously discussed, if you're not turning right, if you're turning left, if you're going straight through the intersection, if you need to avoid the open door of a parked car, if you're passing somebody, there's a bunch of different reasons. But by default, if a bike lane exists, that's where you should expect to see the bicyclists. Class 3 facilities are known as bike routes. There's really nothing special about these other than the sign that says, you know, Balboa Park 2 miles this way, whatever else. It's a road that's better than another one for some reason. Maybe it's wider, maybe it's quieter. The idea is that it's meant to be self-fulfilling prophecy in that you tell people riding bikes to be there more, so then people ride their bikes there more, so then people expect to see bikes there more, which then makes it safer for people to ride bikes, and then more people ride bikes. I don't know how well it works, but it's nice that they exist. It's better than nothing, but it is nothing as far as infrastructure on the specific road. It's just a sign. As opposed to class 4, which is a cycle track, a separated cycling facility. So it's got these cones, these bollards, this physical separation from where the cars are and where the bikes are. Sometimes there are berms, sometimes there are curbs, sometimes it's these plastic delineators, which you can drive over if you're not paying attention, and don't do that. But it prevents parking in the bike facility, which is nice. It's easy to do on a bike lane, but harder to do when it has these physical separations. And between the intersections, it's kind of nice because now I can go the speed I want and I don't have to worry about cars behind me. I have the physical protection of parked cars sometimes. But at intersections, this is definitely a place where you're going to pay extra attention. The car drivers who plan on turning right are no longer able to merge before they make that turn. At some of these intersections, this is downtown, J Street specifically, you'll see bike-specific lights, which are going to be red for cars and then green for bikes. So bikes go first, and then the cars get to make their right turn. So separating those movements. Keep an eye out for those when you see them. And then finally, neighborhood streets. There are, it's not something that's represented on the map, but it's something that's good to know it exists because the traffic is quieter, the streets are, you know, less stressful. So knowing that they exist is a good thing. Let's see. Let me cut out a couple slides because I got 5 minutes. It's illegal to ride your bike on the sidewalk in a business district. It's legal to ride your bike on the sidewalk in a residential area. However, it's never recommended. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe. So if you're going to put yourself on the sidewalk, know that in a business district, it's not technically legal. And in a residential area, every alley, every driveway is a place where there could be someone who doesn't expect to see you there. So it's not generally a good idea. Roundabouts. There are no bike lanes in roundabouts. It's a single lane. The cars and the bikes are one after the other. You can see the bike lane exists before and after, but in the roundabout, it's a single lane. Traffic in the roundabout never stops, and traffic entering the roundabout yields to traffic in the roundabout. So this is the same rules for bikes and cars. That's sort of the thing to remember here, is that if you're using a roundabout, then you're beholden to these rules, regardless of whether you're on a car or on a bike. And finally, I'll finish it off with helmets. If you're under the age of 18, you're required by law to have a helmet on. If you're over the age of 18, you can make all kinds of fun decisions for yourself. They only work if you wear them, so that's why I recommend a fun, silly bike helmet that you actually want to wear. If that means you get a Minions helmet or a Hello Kitty helmet, then go for it. They got helmets with technology and turn signals and all kinds of fun stuff in them now. You're not going to want to wear it if you don't like it. So finding a helmet that you like is best. It only works if you're wearing it. And if you're under 18, it's the law. If you're on a class 3 e-bike, it's the law. If you're on any kind of bike ride with the Bike Coalition, then we're requiring that you put one on. It's always a good idea. It's always something that's recommended. Thank you, Cassidy. We'll see you later. Okay, and so we'll leave it at that. To finish it off, you as a newly minted bike commuter now have access to the Guaranteed Ride Home program through SANDAG. They will pay for the cost of a rideshare trip home. If you're someone that rides your bike to work regularly, you can sign up for up to 3 rides home per year that SANDAG will cover the cost of. This is meant to prevent you from being in emergency situations that would prevent you from riding bikes in the first place. Now that I know I have this backup plan, I'm more likely to ride my bike, which is cool. You can find a link to that in the chat. Through the end of the year, we have discounts available for those of you that visit CycleQuest, Peninsula Bikes, Rad Power Bikes, Stay True Cycle Works, Trek South Bay, and there's also a couple mobile bike repair stations, including Wrench House and VeloFix East. Mention the SANDAG bike commuter discount, and they'll give you a couple bucks off your purchase. It's nice to have a little bit of help, and these are all, I can attest, from personal experience, friendly bike shops. There are cool, nice people that work at all of these shops. I recommend checking them out. So if you lived nearby any of them, you can check that out. And there's information on the website, SANDAG's website, about that as well. And then finally, if you felt like I talked too fast and didn't cover something you wanted covered, maybe there was something that wasn't discussed at all, check if it's in one of these other presentations. So we've got the bike-friendly driver class, we've got bike maintenance quick checks, e-bike classes, commuting 202, all kinds of fun stuff. So you can find more information about that on our website. We can come to your specific workplace if you like. There's lots to learn. This is meant to be the introduction to the topic. Now, at this point, because we got 2 minutes left, if you wouldn't mind, either click the link that's going to be in the chat or scan the QR code with your phone's camera. It's just a super quick survey, gives you the opportunity to say if Mr. Kevin did a good job or a bad job, or how the class worked, if you liked it at all. And for those of you that are watching this recording, you can still take that survey if you'd like. This recording will be available. I'll be sending a personal email to each and every person that registered for this class. I have your email address, and it'll contain a recording to the video, information about the bike map and other things mentioned, a couple other resources as well. And if you wanted to, you could send that to friends of yours who told you they would be here and then didn't end up showing up, and you can shame them in that way if you'd like. So you'll all receive individual emails with the link, and you can share that link. And with that, we're pretty much done. Sandag.org, you can find Sandag. They paid for this class, and they have all kinds of great resources across the county when it comes to bike commuting in general. You can email biking@sandag.org, and you can also reach out to us, the San Diego County Bicycle Coalition, at sdbikecoalition.org. We're on social media as well, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, I think TikTok, although it's been a while since I've seen it. And we've got great resources on our YouTube page as well. Some of them are smaller 1-minute videos, some are an hour long, but there's more information to be had. Consider yourself at the beginning of your journey. There's more to learn. We appreciate you being here. I'll stick around for another 2 or 3 minutes just to see if anyone has anything else to say. But with that, it is 1 o'clock, and we'll leave it there. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll see you on the road. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Hansel. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Delaney. And thank you, Daphne, for the thank yous. We appreciate it. Anybody else who's still around, feel free to put questions in the chat. I'm happy to answer them. Thank you, Edward. see. Anybody else that's still around, I'll even allow you to unmute yourselves if you want. How's that? Participants. There you go. Bill, Moises, Osvaldo, Peter, Pensiers, anything to say? Thank you, Pete. I appreciate it. Okay, we'll leave it there. See you guys on the road. Thanks so much.